You ready?
Yep.
Here we go.
Hi, my name is Tanvi Chenaru, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my research on how high school students define success. First, one of my foundational sources by Carol Sansone and Judith Horakowitz introduces the idea of extrinsic and intrinsic factors and how they influence a person's behavior. They define extrinsic factors as rewards as affirmation or as a punishment and the avoidance of punishment. They define intrinsic factors as the 4 C's of challenge, curiosity, control, and context. Through my survey, I plan on assessing what different extrinsic and intrinsic factors influence a high school student's definition of success. This led to my research goal: how do extrinsic and intrinsic factors relate to Fairfield County High School students' definitions of success? I chose this topic because as a senior going through the whole college process, applying to a good college and getting good grades was what was most important to me. However, I wanted to see what other students felt as well. My research goal through this was to gather information about factors that correlate with definitions and relay this information to the schools surveyed. I wanted to do this in order to inform them on students' outlooks and promote well-rounded students. I obtained this goal when looking at the source by Jimenez and Sargrad. This quote in summary says that students in America are falling behind other countries in core academic subjects because other countries expose their students to well-rounded curriculum, while students in America are solely focused on the core academic subjects. This led to my hypothesis that most students would give a definition of success that comprises of academic factors such as getting good grades, high test scores, and a high GPA. The research gap I aimed to address was to do this study on high school students in Connecticut. A source by Nancy Jennings conducted a survey done on 66 undergraduate students in Newcastle schools, while Moira Caccia did the same study on 16 undergraduate students in London. Also, in Connecticut, Moira Caccia did it in London, and Mark Schoeffel did a study conducted in Pennsylvania. Moving on to my methods, this survey was voluntary and for ages 14 to 18, so I asked for both participant and parental consent. When designing my survey, I asked myself, why a survey and not interviews? I conducted a survey in order to be able to reach a larger number of students, and interviews would create a large time constraint in having to interview all the students that were surveyed. I also chose Fairfield County high schools because Fairfield County contains a diverse range of schools with students from different demographics, and these demographics would help me compare how students from these different demographics would relate to their definition of success. My first question in my survey was the foundational question of how would you define a successful high school experience for yourself? This was the baseline question in my survey and what all the extrinsic and intrinsic factor questions would be related to. Next, I asked questions regarding extrinsic factors about grade, ethnicity, parental involvement, the number of AP classes a student takes, the access to technology a student has at home and at school, and how encouraged a student is to be creative at home and at school. Next, I asked a series of questions regarding intrinsic factors. There were multiple phrases that a student had to rate using a Likert scale from 1 to 4, where 1 is never, 2 is a few times, 3 is often, and 4 is constantly. I also asked a next series of questions in a select all that apply matter, and this was done in a select all that apply if a student felt that more than one of these phrases pertained to them, and it was also marked not mandatory in case a student felt that none of the questions pertained to them. Next, moving on to my results, I used a Google Sheets to filter the responses and categorize the definitions into 4 categories of academic achievement, academic engagement, social and residential, and life management. My survey yielded responses from 2 high schools in Fairfield County from students ranging from grades 9 to 12. 63% were female, 30.5% were male, 0.02% were non-binary, and 0.04% preferred not to say. In doing my survey, I originally had 20 questions. However, after organizing the data and analyzing it, I excluded 8 of the questions as they had no distinct correlation between the factor and the definition of success. After analyzing the data, the student definitions were categorized into 4 categories using a table by Nancy Jennings. The criteria were changed a little bit in order for them to pertain to high school students instead of college students. The criteria for academic engagement included the desire to learn, taking interesting classes, connecting with faculty, and exploring new areas. The criteria for academic achievement included getting good grades, milestones, participating in career-oriented activities, and improving skills. Criteria for social and residential included making new friends, extracurricular activities, maintaining friendships, and finding romance. And the criteria for life management included well-being, work ethic, balance, and dissatisfaction with school. Now I'm going to show you how I categorized some definitions. This first definition was categorized as academic achievement because the student talked about getting good grades and having a high GPA in order to get into a good college and ultimately be successful. This next definition was categorized as academic engagement because they talked about how their success was measured by how much they learned in school. This next definition was categorized under social and residential and life management. It was categorized under social and residential because the student talked about building relationships, and life management because the student talked about being satisfied with their life. And lastly, this definition fell under life management because the student talked about being satisfied with what they want to do later in life. Moving on to my extrinsic factors, as you can see, majority of the respondents were female across the board, and this could be because the survey was voluntary and more females just happened to respond to the survey. And the greatest split between male and female responses were under academic engagement, where 74% were female and 21% were male. Next, under grade levels, you can see as you go up grade levels, the importance of life management increases, and this could be because students are getting prepared for life in college and beyond college. And under academic achievement, you could see that the importance decreases, where 32% said it was important and only 19 12th graders found it important. And this could be because students are getting burned out due to school or quote-unquote senioritis. And lastly, as you can see, the life management decreases based on the number of AP classes a student takes, where 44% took 0 to 3 APs, and only 5% took 10 to 15 APs. And this could be because students are focused more on their schoolwork rather than other life and social skills. Moving on to my second half of questions, which were the intrinsic factors, where the students were to rate the phrases based on how much they felt it pertained to them from a scale of 1 to 4. As for students who felt down, depressed, and hopeless, you could see that students who never felt this way were more likely to talk about academic engagement, and students who constantly felt this way were more likely to talk about academic achievement. Next, under social and residential, you could see that there's a steady decrease as students felt that they have more and more trouble caring for themselves, where 36% felt that they never had trouble caring for themselves, and 11% felt that they constantly had trouble caring for themselves. And this could be because students are focused on their own students are more focused on their own well-being rather than other social and life aspects. Ultimately, my hypothesis that most students would give a definition of success that comprises of academic factors such as getting good grades, test scores, and raising their GPA was true to a moderate extent because most students did focus completely on academic achievement factors or included an aspect of academic achievement in their definitions. However, some students also didn't include any aspect of academic achievement or engagement in their definitions, but rather focused on other social and residential and life management skills. Some implications of my survey is to relay this information to faculty and administrators in order to help them understand students' outlooks and help promote well-rounded students. I would also hope that this would decrease course load, as you can see, because in AP classes, as that increased, the importance of academic achievement increased, and in order to promote well-rounded students and get rid of this emphasis on academic achievement, a possible decrease in course load would help that. Next, my limitations. This survey was voluntary, which means that I couldn't generalize the information to all students that participated in this survey. And there was a lack of survey responses, and this could be also due to it being voluntary, so not everyone felt that they had to answer it. In the future, to overcome these limitations, I could take a simple random sample in order to make the survey inclusive and to be able to generalize the information to all the students in the high schools that participated. I could also focus on one extrinsic or intrinsic factor and compare that to the student definition in order to go more in depth and make a more clear distinction between the factor and the definition. I could also conduct interviews in order to understand further why students define success the way they did. I could also solely ask students to define success and focus on dissecting the definitions rather than worrying about the factors that correlate with the definitions. Thank you for listening. I could take any oral defense questions.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, Tammy. How did you determine which results generated by your research methods were most important in informing your new understanding?
So when conducting my research and analyzing my data, I originally did analyze all the questions that I asked. However, when looking at the data, there were some questions where the percentages did not vary per category, and those are the questions that I removed from my results.
That's that one. How did the limitations of your method or data influence your new understanding?
Because the survey was voluntary, I didn't have as many responses, and I couldn't generalize the information to all the public. So I can't use this information and say that all high school students feel that academic achievement is important, or that social and residential is important in this aspect, but I have to solely focus and compare or apply these responses to the students that were surveyed.
Okay.
So think back on the initial curiosity that sparked your inquiry. What other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
Going into my survey, I solely focused on Fairfield County. However, after doing more research and looking at other research done through my literature review, I would hope to look at other states or other counties in Connecticut in order to see how their definitions would compare to definitions in Fairfield County. And I feel that this has prepared me to do so, because I'm able to, or I understand how to reach out to different schools and how to send surveys to principals, and I know like the step-by-step as to how to make this survey applicable to all students.
Yay!
Good job.